This is an analysis from Alpha Business Media.
And welcome. Whether you are prepping for a major strategy meeting, analyzing global market trends, or, you are just one of those insanely curious people who loves understanding how business actually works under the hood, you are in exactly the right place. We are thrilled to have you joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, it is great to be here. We've got a really fascinating one today.
We really do. Today, we are exploring a frankly staggering statistic from a new analysis on digital transformation. We are looking closely at enterprise resource planning, so ERP projects, specifically within the business landscape of Nepal.
Right, and the numbers here are just wild.
They are. The number that anchors this entire discussion is this. 70% of major ERP projects in Nepal either fail completely or face severe underutilization.
70%. Just think about that for a second.
Exactly. I mean, we are talking about massive capital investments here, ranging anywhere from 50 million to well over 500 million rupees, and it is essentially turning into digital dead weight inside these companies.
It is a remarkable statistic, especially given the scale of capital being deployed. When you see a failure rate that high on investments of that size, you are no longer looking at a minor operational hiccup or, a bad software patch.
Right.
You're looking at the systematic destruction of value across boardrooms in Kathmandu's business district. And it is a pattern that just repeats itself consistently across different legacy companies.
Yeah, we see the exact same life cycle play out every time. A respective legacy company, maybe a powerhouse in trading or manufacturing, holds a big press release to celebrate their leap into the digital future.
Right, lots of fanfare.
Lots of fanfare. But then 6 months later, the implementation is in total chaos. A year later, it is either quietly abandoned entirely, or it gets downgraded to basically a wildly overpriced, very basic accounting module.
Which completely defeats the purpose of an ERP.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this, because the most crucial thing to establish right out of the gate is that this is not a technology problem.
No, not at all.
These are world-class software suites. The platforms we are talking about are built by SAP, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics. These are the exact same systems trusted by global Fortune 500 companies to run incredibly complex multinational supply chains. The software functions exactly as designed.
And that is the fundamental misconception leadership teams often have. They think the software is failing the business.
But it isn't.
No, it isn't. Instead, the software is actively revealing deeply entrenched cultural dysfunctions within those businesses. If you think of an ERP, you shouldn't think of it as a hammer that you use to build a new, modernized company. You have to think of it as a mirror.
A mirror. I really like that analogy.
Yeah, because when traditional Nepali business houses implement these incredibly precise, high-definition digital systems, they're holding up a mirror to their own operations. And the reflection shows a culture of strategic opacity. It shows deeply ingrained habits that simply do not translate to a binary digital environment. It's a failure of corporate culture, not a failure of code.
The ERP acting as a mirror is such a vital framework for this entire deep dive. It forces a company to look at its actual operational reality. So let's break down what they are actually seeing in that reflection.
That's it.
This brings us to the foundational rule of any modern ERP system. It absolutely demands a single source of truth. And it demands it in real time.
In real time, being the key there.
Right. Every single transaction, whether it is a massive purchase order being processed in Burgunj or just a localized sales invoice being generated in Pokhara, it has to be entered accurately into one unified, auditable database.
Which sounds totally normal if you were running a modern digitized enterprise. That is just the baseline of operational excellence.
But the source material points out that for many of these traditional trading houses, establishing a single source of truth acts as a literal existential threat to how they have historically done business.
What's fascinating here is that the resistance to this single source of truth is not born out of ignorance. It's not an inability to understand the technology.
Right. They aren't just confused by the software.
Exactly. It is an active, rational defense of highly complex, multi-generational business system. To understand this, we have to look at the widespread practice of maintaining dual ledgers.
The dual ledgers. This is where it gets complicated.
Very. In many of these traditional firms, it is essentially an open secret that the company operates on two entirely different sets of books. You have the Paka book, which serves as the official sanitized record prepared strictly for tax authorities and banking compliance.
Right, the clean version.
The clean version, yeah. And then you have the Kacha book.
And the Kacha book is the actual messy ground floor reality of the business operations. It is the true ledger.
Precisely.
It tracks the informal handshake credit lines handed out to loyal long-term distributors. It records the special negotiated discounts that function more like complex off-the-books rebates. It monitors inventory movements that might not be entirely, let's say, officially sanctioned by customs. And it tracks the fluid cash transactions that basically lubricate the entire domestic supply chain.
The Kacha book is a highly sophisticated system of risk management and strategic ambiguity. It is a mistake to view it purely as simple tax evasion.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. In many ways, the Kacha book is the actual operating system of the traditional family business. It allows for a level of extreme flexibility and centralized family control that a rigid, transparent system would immediately disrupt.
And into this highly specific environment arrives a multi-million rupee ERP software suite that has absolutely zero concept of a Kacha book.
Not at all.
The ERP is a binary rules-based engine. It cannot process the nuance of a handshake deal, or a discretionary under-the-table discount verbally approved by the patriarch of the family business over a cup of tea.
It just computes data.
Right. So if we look at how this plays out during an actual rollout, the chaos is immediate. Just picture a mid-level procurement manager sitting at a desk with an implementation consultant.
Oh, this is a perfect example.
Right. The consultant says, please input the real cost of this recently imported container into the new system. That manager is immediately paralyzed. Which real cost is the system asking for?
It creates a localized crisis for that employee right there at the desk. Does the manager enter the cost listed on the official customs declaration, which aligns with the PACA book?
Or does he enter the cost that includes the unofficial facilitation fees paid at the border?
Or perhaps the cost that is only shared with the junior family members managing logistics? Or does he need the ultimate final number that is known only to the patriarch himself?
And all the while, the software just sits there with a blinking cursor, demanding a single, auditable number.
But the underlying business culture has thrived for decades by intentionally ensuring that no such single number exists on paper.
It's a classic J-I-Go dilemma, garbage in, garbage out, but happening on a massive corporate scale. You are feeding this highly advanced, incredibly expensive analytical machine a diet of blurry, distorted, and intentionally conflicted data.
Because the employees are trapped by the system's design.
Yes. They either enter the sanitized PACA data, which immediately makes the ERP's beautiful analytical dashboards completely useless for any real-world decision-making, because it's not the real data.
Right. Or they try to invent a sanitized hybrid version of the Kacha data, which inevitably creates data conflicts, flags compliance warnings, and basically crashes the automated workflow entirely.
And when the system inevitably grinds to a halt because it is being fed conflicting data, the leadership's response is so predictable, they blame the software.
Always. They sit in the boardroom and declare that the system is too complex for their specific market conditions.
But the irony is that the ERP system is actually too simple. It's entirely too logical for the highly complex, intentionally illogical reality it is being asked to model.
Exactly. The problem isn't the software's complexity. It is that the software requires a level of simplicity and truth that the business actively avoids.
Okay, let's shift the focus a bit. Let's move away from the boardroom's data dilemma and look down into the middle ranks of the company. Because the source material highlights that while the data problem certainly starts at the top with leadership, the active day-to-day sabotage of the ERP system happens right in the middle.
That's right.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Executive leadership almost always misinterprets this pushback. When middle managers fight the software implementation, the executives assume they're just dealing with laziness, or an unwillingness to learn new processes, or a general fear of new technology.
But if you analyze the mechanics of the traditional business, that resistance is a highly strategic and completely rational survival tactic.
Explain that. Why is it rational to sabotage your own company's software?
Well, you have to look closely at how a middle manager, someone operating in procurement, sales, or logistics, actually derives their power and influence within these legacy structures. Their job security, their authority over their team, and frequently a significant portion of their unofficial income are built entirely on information asymmetry.
They are the gatekeepers.
Exactly. They operate as absolute gatekeepers of vital business data.
They hold the keys to the kingdom because they are the only ones who know where the doors are.
Perfectly said.
If we look at the procurement head in a traditional trading house, Historically, his primary value to the company isn't just negotiating a baseline price. His true organizational value lies in his deeply cultivated personal relationships with suppliers.
He is the single point of contact who knows which supplier offers the best unwritten terms.
Right. He knows exactly who to call to expedite a shipment through a notoriously opaque customs and logistics network.
And then the ERP is deployed.
Mm.
By its very design, the ERP automates, standardizes, and centralizes all of that fragmented data.
Mhm.
Suddenly, with a few clicks on a dashboard, anyone in the executive leadership team can run a report showing the complete historical price variance, the exact payment terms, and the delivery performance metrics of every single supplier across the board.
The procurement head's special secret knowledge is instantly democratized.
It is subjected to immediate objective scrutiny. If his long-favored relationship-based supplier is actually the most expensive or least reliable option, the software exposes that inefficiency instantly. The ERP annihilates his personal fiefdom.
And we see the exact same dynamic play out on the sales side of the business, too.
Oh, absolutely.
A veteran sales manager in one of these legacy firms derives his authority from his personal mental ledger of client relationships. He intimately knows a distributor's true creditworthiness completely, regardless of what the official banking records or pocketbooks say.
Because he's been working with them for 20 years.
Exactly. He is the one who holds the power to decide who gets a longer credit period during a cash crunch, or who needs a personal follow-up call rather than a formal automated invoice. But once the ERP is live, the automated credit control module kicks in.
And it has no feelings.
None.
Yeah.
It automatically flags an overdue account based strictly on the data and physically blocks a new sales order from being processed for that key client.
The sales manager reacts to this automation with immediate hostility. He views the system as a blunt, unfeeling instrument that is actively interfering with his delicate, highly profitable relationship management.
But what is genuinely happening is that the ERP is enforcing a uniform, company-wide business rule without bias.
And in doing so, it completely strips away the manager's discretionary power. So when that manager conveniently forgets to update the central sales logs or encourages his junior team to just keep running operations off their old decentralized Excel sheet.
Which happens all the time.
All the time. Or when he loudly complains in meetings that the system is too rigid to do business in Nepal. He is not being a Luddite. It is a highly rational, calculated act of professional self-preservation.
The source compares this dynamic to an autoimmune disease. The very people who are officially tasked by the company with championing efficiency and process improvement, the middle managers, are actually financially and professionally incentivized to fight it tooth and nail.
The body is actively attacking the cure.
They aren't fighting the technology. They are fighting the transparency and accountability that the technology inevitably brings. It becomes a massive internal battleground. Is this business going to be run by standardized processes and transparent centralized data, or will it continue to be run by personal fiefdoms and carefully guarded silos of information?
And according to the statistics we started with, in 70% of these cases, the fiefdoms win. The ERP is defeated.
It's defeated because the very foundation of the business was engineered for a completely different era.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to talk about the economic concept of path dependency. Path dependency dictates that the decisions a company or an entire regional economy makes today are heavily restricted by the decisions, structures, and survival strategies they relied upon in the past, even if those historical circumstances have completely vanished.
Nepal's private sector was largely forged in a historical era defined by extreme scarcity, by strict government import licenses, and by high-margin, low-volume trading operations.
And thriving in that specific environment over decades created a very distinct business DNA.
It's a corporate environment that naturally optimizes for a highly protected, informal, and deeply relationship-driven economy. This traditional trading house DNA values operational flexibility over rigid processes. It prioritizes private negotiation over public standardization, and above all else, it values strategic opacity over transparency.
Those traits were absolutely essential survival mechanisms in a pre-liberalization economy. If a company wasn't flexible and opaque back then, they simply did not survive the regulatory environment of the time.
But fast forward to today, and you have a massive structural and cultural clash. ERP systems are the exact opposite of that historical DNA.
They are the quintessential product of a process-driven, highly optimized manufacturing mindset. SAP was born from the precision of German engineering. Oracle was born from the relentless drive of American corporate efficiency.
Right. These systems exist to systematize, to measure, and to optimize every single workflow down to the microscopic level.
So you are attempting to graft a highly rigid, process-oriented manufacturing brain into a fluid, relationship-oriented trading house body. The tissue rejection is almost guaranteed, because the traditional business model historically derived its massive profit margins from navigating exceptions and exploiting market imperfections.
Whereas the ERP exists solely to eliminate exceptions and perfect the market data.
Exactly. It's fundamentally incompatible unless something drastic changes.
The source material provides a brilliant contrasting example to really highlight why this transition is so difficult in Nepal specifically. It brings up the digital adoption we have seen in Bangladesh's ready-made garment sector, the R&G sector. The garment factories in Bangladesh adopted these exact same ERP systems, but their success rate was remarkably different.
The divergence in outcomes comes entirely down to the presence of existential external pressure. The Bangladeshi factory owners weren't necessarily more eager to embrace digital transparency than their Nepali counterparts.
They didn't just wake up and want to be transparent.
No, of course not. But they were facing intense, cutthroat global competition and the absolute demands of multinational retail giants like Zara and H&M. These global buyers demanded extreme supply chain efficiency.
They required their suppliers to manage highly complex logistics networks, track production efficiency on the factory floor down to the minute, and provide real-time, transparent compliance data to ensure ethical sourcing.
If a factory in Dhaka couldn't provide that transparent data through a certified ERP, Zara simply moved their multi-million-dollar contracts to a factory in Vietnam or Cambodia that could.
The factories in Bangladesh had absolutely no choice. The immense external pressure from their primary revenue source forced a painful but entirely necessary internal cultural change. They had to break down their own fiefdoms and adopt the software to survive in the global market.
Exactly. But if you look at the landscape for large legacy firms in Nepal, that same level of existential external pressure simply does not exist. A significant portion of the formal economy remains heavily focused on the domestic trading of imported goods, and that is protected by various geographic and regulatory moats.
So if a large Nepali trading house decides to just muddle through with inefficient paper-based systems or continues relying on their multi-generational Kacha books, they can afford to do so.
They can afford it because nearly all of their local competitors are operating the exact same way. The immediate financial pain of tearing down their entire corporate culture and surviving the chaos of an ERP implementation is perceived as far greater than the pain of staying exactly the same.
The incentive to undergo genuine, foundational digital transformation simply isn't strong enough.
The ERP transplant is rejected because the patient fundamentally doesn't believe they're sick enough to endure the surgery.
So what does this all mean? We have a 70% failure rate, hundreds of millions of rupees wasted on software licenses, entrenched middle management actively sabotaging the rollouts, and a historical trading DNA that fundamentally fights transparency. What is the actual path forward for these companies?
The corporate landscape moving forward is going to be defined by a massive bifurcation. The dividing line won't be about which company buys the newest, most expensive software update. It will be defined entirely by executive leadership and generational change.
The source material points to two distinct future scenarios here.
Right. The first scenario, which unfortunately is the most probable outcome for the majority of these legacy businesses, is the stubborn continuation of the status quo.
In that status quo scenario, the founders and the first-generation leaders continue treating digital transformation simply as an IT procurement problem. They buy the flashy, expensive ERP suite, mostly to use as a corporate status symbol.
They want to say they have SAP.
Exactly. But they delegate the entire complex implementation process to their chief technology officer, or they hire an external foreign consultant, effectively washing their hands of the cultural integration.
And when it inevitably fails, due to middle management sabotage and data conflicts, they act shocked and frustrated. They waste crores of rupees, only to end up with a fragmented system that creates more manual data entry work for their staff than it saves.
And ultimately, they use that failure as a shield to justify their old ways, concluding that modern systems just don't work in the local context. All the while, their operational costs steadily rise, and their competitive edge slowly erodes against leaner operations.
That is the path of slow, comfortable decline. But the second scenario is far more optimistic, and we're actually starting to see it take shape. This shift is being driven by an entirely new cohort of leaders.
We are talking about the second or third generation family members who were educated abroad, exposed to global supply chains, or professional CEOs brought in specifically by boards to modernize the operation.
These leaders recognize the fundamental truth we have been unpacking today. An ERP is not a technology project. It is a deeply painful, foundational business transformation project. And they recognize that it must be led personally, forcefully, from the very top down.
These are the leaders who are actually willing to perform the cultural surgery. They don't just plug in the software and hope for the best. They spend months, sometimes years, redesigning the actual business processes before the software ever goes live.
They actively change the financial incentive structures for their middle managers so that bonuses are tied to data accuracy rather than hidden margins. They continuously communicate the strategic why behind the new transparency.
And most importantly, they make the incredibly difficult, unpopular decisions to flatten the old corporate hierarchies. They enforce strict data discipline and hold every single employee, including family members, accountable to a single source of truth.
And by successfully doing that, they finally unlock the actual analytical power of the software. They become significantly leaner, they execute faster, and they build a formidable operational moat that the legacy Pakikacha firms simply will not be able to cross when market conditions inevitably tighten.
An ERP is a mirror. For 70% of these businesses, they simply are not ready to confront the culture of opacity that stares back at them when the system goes live.
These transformative leaders understand that the 70% failure rate of the ERP is not the actual disease. It is merely a symptom of a deeper organizational stagnation. The real cost to these businesses is not the wasted software license fee or the consultant's hourly rate.
It's the opportunity cost.
The true existential cost is the continued acceptance of an outdated, opaque business model in a globalized economic landscape that is mercilessly, relentlessly moving toward absolute digital transparency. The ultimate question for any CEO or board member facing an ERP implementation isn't, which software vendor should I choose? The actual question is, are we, as a leadership team, willing to fundamentally change the company that this software is about to reveal?
It takes immense executive courage to look at that harsh reflection, acknowledge the inefficiencies, and decide to change the operational reality rather than just blaming the software and throwing away the mirror.
This raises an important question, something for you to consider and explore on your own as we wrap up this analysis. We have discussed at length how this software inherently enforces the cultural and operational norms of its original creators. It actively imposes German manufacturing precision or American corporate efficiency onto entirely different, deeply historical, relationship-based economies.
It's a massive cultural export.
Exactly. So as globalized enterprise software continues to relentlessly standardize and dictate business processes worldwide, it makes you wonder, is it ultimately erasing local, nuanced business cultures entirely? And if so, is that standardization simply a necessary, inevitable evolution for participating in global commerce, or is it a subtle form of digital imperialism?
That is a fascinating dynamic to consider, whether the drive for global efficiency inherently requires the flattening of local business ecosystems. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you go back to your own work, I encourage you to look closely at your own industry, your own supply chain, or even your own office. Ask yourself, where might the modernized versions of the Kacha books be hiding in your world? Are there middle management fiefdoms resisting transparency right under your nose? Keep questioning the systems around you, keep learning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.